Welcome back to Harmonized Spirits. I am Christopher Wolfing Spirit. In our last transmission, we mapped the multidimensional tree and explored the high-frequency architecture of the upper world. Now, today, we turn our gaze downward and inward. We are descending into the landscape of the lower world, and we are unpacking one of the most misunderstood ancient and vital practices in the shamanic lineage. This is the anatomy of soul retrieval. In modern wellness circles, people throw around terms like inner child work or healing your trauma. They treat psychological wounding as a purely mental exercise, something you can fix by just talking about it or analyzing it. But true spiritual masters understand that trauma is not just a psychological knot. It is an energetic event. When a human being experiences a moment of severe trauma, shock, or heartbreak, the human psyche faces a choice: break entirely or fragment to survive. To preserve the life of the individual, a piece of the vital life force, a literal fragment of the soul essence, splits off and flees into the non-ordinary reality of the lower world. It hides in the subconscious matrix to escape the pain of the impact. While this is a brilliant spiritual defense mechanism, it leaves the individual walking through the physical world fractured. They are alive, but they are hollow. Now, today we are going to strip away the poetic metaphors and look at the actual technical mechanics of soul loss, how to track these fragments through the subconscious realms, and how to use the structure of Reiki to safely bring them home. To understand how a soul fragment becomes lost, you must understand the energetic anatomy of trauma. Every human being is surrounded by an intricate, multi-layered auric field that acts as a container for our vital life force. When a traumatic event occurs, whether that is a childhood abandonment, a severe car accident, a brutal divorce, or the sudden loss of a loved one, it acts like an energetic missile piercing that field. The impact is too intense for the central nervous system to integrate all at once. To prevent total system failure, the psyche automatically detaches the specific part of your essence that experienced the pain. If you were abandoned at 7 years old, that 7-year-old fragment of your joy, your trust, and your vitality leaves your physical body. It descends into the timeless, dreaming layers of the lower world. The problem is, once the physical danger has passed, that fragment does not automatically return in all cases. It may remain frozen in time, stuck in the exact moment the trauma occurred, waiting in the dark. And what happens to the person left behind here in the physical world? they walk away from the trauma feeling permanently altered. They say phrases like, "I feel like a piece of me died that day," or, "I've never quite been the same since that relationship ended." They aren't speaking metaphorically. They are diagnosing their own soul loss. They are experiencing the literal, structural vacuum left behind by their missing essence. This is where the standard modern healer hits a massive plateau. If a practitioner only uses traditional Reiki, they can pour beautiful, universal life force into a client's chakras. They can balance the energetic flow and soothe the nervous system. But if there is a literal vacuum where a soul piece used to be, that high vibrational light has nowhere to anchor. It's kind of like pouring water into a bucket with a hole in the bottom. The client feels amazing on your table, but 3 days later, the emptiness returns because the original tenant of that space is still hiding in the dark of the lower world. True mastery requires you to become a tracker. You'll need to open the portals, pick up the drum, and enter the landscape of the subconscious to find what was lost. But navigating the lower world is not a game. It is a dense, labyrinthine space filled with ancestral memory, collective shadows, and deceptive astral loops. If you go in with just a drum and blind intent, you can easily get turned around, take on the client's trauma yourself, or return empty-handed. This is where we activate the alchemy of our hybrid lineage. We do not journey into the dark unprotected. So before we descend, we use the precise geometry of Reiki to map our coordinates and seal our field. We build an unbreakable line of communication between our physical body and our traveling consciousness. When we find the soul fragment resting in the subconscious landscape, we do not just grab it. We use the specific, intelligent frequencies of Reiki to cleanse the fragment of its ancient, long-time shock, soothe its fear, and wrap it in a high-vibrational cocoon. The Reiki symbols act as a golden tractor beam, ensuring that as we ascend back through the worlds, the fragment is stabilized and protected until it reaches the physical container. To make this entirely concrete, let me pull back the curtain and walk you through what this actually looks like when we are operating in the room. Imagine a client sitting across from you. They are successful on paper, but they feel completely hollow inside, unable to sustain a healthy relationship and constantly feeling like an imposter. They have spent years in therapy talking about their childhood, but nothing has shifted. We open the sacred space. We establish our three-point alignment, anchoring ourselves heavily into the earth. You pick up the drum, allowing the rhythmic, repetitive 180 beats per minute cadence to drop your brain waves into a deep theta state. You activate the higher degree Reiki symbols over your crown and your heart, creating that golden elevator shaft we spoke about. Then you make the descent. As you journey down into the lower world on behalf of this client, you are not wandering around aimlessly. You are tracking a specific energetic frequency. You bypass the collective astral noise until the landscape shifts into a memory grid. Suddenly, you'll see it. You see a visual manifestation of a boardroom. Inside that room is a fragment of this client, frozen at 24 years old, the exact day their first business failed and their mentor publicly humiliated him. In that moment of intense shock, their confidence, their creative fire, and their willingness to be seen split entirely off from their physical body to escape the pain. For 15 years, that 24-year-old fragment has been sitting alone in that frozen, non-ordinary boardroom, trapped in time. Now, if you were just a traditional shamanic practitioner, you might try to convince the fragment to follow you. But often, these fragments are terrified, defensive, or covered in the heavy energy of the trauma itself. This is where the alchemy happens. You would step forward into that landscape and activate the Reiki frequencies directly inside the vision. You channel the universal life force energy into the room. The crystalline light of Reiki immediately begins to melt the frozen trauma. It acts like a cosmic solvent, dissolving the old shock and fear out of the fragment's energetic body. You wrap the 24-year-old piece in a warm, protective, high-vibrational cocoon of light. You look at the fragment and it recognizes you, not as a stranger, but as the future version of itself coming back to save it. You bring it back, and it steps into the client's heart space. You seal the field, and using the Reiki line as my or your guide, sending back up the cosmic tree, bringing that missing fire back into the physical room. Now look at the physical reality of the client lying on the table. The moment that piece enters the room, their physical body takes a sudden involuntary gasp of air. Their eyelids flutter. The color is physically rushing back into their cheeks. Why? Well, because the original tenant has just walked back through the front door. So once you see this happen in real life and in real time, you realize why surface level energy work can never compete with multidimensional architecture and Reiki work. So now let's look at how you can diagnose whether this level of fragmentation is really happening inside of your own system. So let's look at the symptoms. How do you know if you or your clients you are serving are suffering from soul loss? Now there's a distinct checklist of chronic systemic issues that indicate a fragment of essence is missing from the physical body. First is the feeling of chronic numbness or disassociation. If you constantly feel like an outside observer watching your own life, or if you feel emotionally flatlined, unable to feel deep joy or even deep grief, there is a structural vacancy in your system. Second is a broken memory grid. If there are massive, multi-year blocks of your childhood or your past that are completely blank, that is not just forgetfulness. That is an indicator that the fragment holding those memories is currently residing in the lower world. Third is chronic addiction or dependency. When there is a vacuum in the soul architecture, the human ego desperately tries to fill it with external substances, alcohol, drugs, toxic relationships, or compulsive working. But you cannot fill a spiritual hole with a material substance. Fourth is an inability to move past a specific event. If you are still energetically fighting an ex-partner from 5 years ago, or still trapped in the grief of an old loss, a piece of your vital timeline is literally stuck in that coordinate. If you recognize these symptoms within yourself or those you treat, hear this truth. You cannot think your way out of soul loss. You cannot talk your way out of it. It requires a multidimensional intervention. When a tracker successfully returns from the lower world with a soul fragment, the work is only half done. The final, most critical technical step is the somatic integration. A soul piece cannot just be handed back mentally. It must be physically breathed into the body. In our lineage, the master places their hands precisely on the client's heart chakra and also the crown chakra, utilizing a specific focused breath sequence. We use the breath to blow the purified essence directly into the physical bone marrow and the nervous system of the recipient. Once the essence enters, the client must immediately lock it in through physical, somatic awareness. They must feel the weight of their muscles, the pressure of their feet on the floor, and the expansion of their lungs. They must welcome the piece home by providing it with a stable, grounded house. Over the next 21 days, that integration continues. The physical body must adapt to the sudden increase in voltage. This is where the real healing work begins, not by escaping the body, but by becoming fully inhabited. As we close this third transmission, I invite you to sit with this contemplation. What part of your vital life force did you leave behind to survive your past? And are you ready to finally go down into the dark and bring that peace home? True power is not about being spotless. It is about being whole. If you feel the call to move beyond surface level healing and master the royal technical science of soul retrieval, your lineage is waiting. The doors to the Reiki Shamanism Initiation open August 8th, 2026. This is where we train the trackers, the architects, and the sovereign masters of the next paradigm. To claim your seat, to access our foundational shadow work tools, and to join the community of spirits who are actively putting themselves back together, click the link in the show notes below and step inside the Harmonized Spirits community. I am Christopher Wolfing Spirit. Thank you for journeying into the deep earth with me today. Until next time, stand in your sovereignty.